Hey guys, for thousands of years, the truth was buried, rewritten, or erased entirely. But the cracks are finally showing. These are the ancient cover-ups they never wanted you to discover. And once you see them, you'll never look at history the same way again. So let's start. Moonlit pillars of Teotihuacan. Night settles over the Valley of Mexico like a velvet shroud, dimming the last rust-red glow along the horizon until the pyramids stand in silhouette, immense, silent, almost breathing beneath the dark. The air cools slowly, as if reluctant to release the day's heat stored in ancient stones. And there, in that blue-black stillness, Teotihuacan becomes something more than an archaeological site. It becomes a presence, a long-sleeping intelligence watching the centuries drift past like migrating clouds. A soft breeze stirs the dry grass between the avenue of the dead, carrying with it the faint mineral scent of obsidian dust. It catches the moon just so, painting the pyramid of the sun in silver. From afar, it seems carved with mathematical certainty. From up close, the stones feel almost too deliberate, too aligned, too old. And as the camera of our imagination glides low along the base, following that pale shimmer, we drift gently into a question scholars rarely phrase aloud. What lies beneath these stones that was never meant to be found? Archaeologists working here in the early 2010 seconds uncovered something curious beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. A tunnel sealed for nearly 1,800 years, its walls smeared with glittering mineral dust. They expected clay, stone, maybe ceremonial artifacts. But no one expected the shimmering pools discovered deep in the tunnel, the strange traces of liquid mercury, glinting like a mirror to another world. Mercury, in the ancient world, was rare, poisonous, costly, and notoriously difficult to produce. It was not something a civilization used lightly. And yet here, beneath Teotihuacan, it appeared in intentional streams and basins, as though it once represented a river to someplace unseen. Mainstream scholars suggest it symbolized the underworld, a reflective passage for the dead. Others propose it marked a cosmic map, an alchemical illusion meant to dazzle initiates. But in the hush of night, with moonlight brushing the stones, another line of thought whispers through the dark. Why conceal such a thing so deeply, and why seal the tunnel so tightly? Because someone wanted it forgotten, or perhaps feared it would be misunderstood. As we drift deeper into the scene, the pyramids loom not as ruins, but as characters' massive silhouettes against a scattered trail of stars. They belong to a city without a known founder, a metropolis that rose suddenly around 100 CE, grew to hold over 100,000 souls, and fell just as mysteriously. This absence of clear origin unsettles even seasoned historians, who often note that Teotihuacan was at its height, while Rome still flourished across the ocean. And yet we know who built Rome. We do not know who built this. The moon rises higher, casting the avenue of the dead in pale stripes of shadow. It is said the layout of the city mirrors a precise cosmic plan. The Pyramid of the Moon aligns with the Cerro Gordo mountain, while the Pyramid of the Sun echoes the motion of the equinox sun. But certain alignments, those pointing to the Pleiades, to Orion, to cycles of Venus, stir debates even today. Scholars still debate whether the precision is intentional or merely a coincidence shaped by repeated reconstruction. But standing here in imagination, under a quiet sky, coincidence feels like a fragile explanation. Footsteps echo softly, perhaps our own, perhaps those of long-gone priests woven into the memory of this place, and we descend into the idea of Teotihuacan, not as a city, but as a mechanism. Some researchers point to the peculiar mica sheets found sealed inside certain structures, a mineral sometimes associated with insulation or energy conduction. Others whisper of the tunnel's mercury as part of some lost ritual technology. And while these theories drift at the fringe of academic circles, they linger because Teotihuacan's architecture refuses to yield simple answers. The city's name was given by the later Aztecs, long after it had already collapsed. Teotihuacan, the place where gods were made. But perhaps the more haunting translation offered by some linguists, the place where one becomes a god, is the one that fits the moonlit hush tonight. Let us step further into the tunnel beneath the Feathered Serpent Temple, guided only by the faint glimmer on the walls. Archaeologists reported pyrite fragments embedded like stars in the earth, creating the illusion of a night sky underground. Mercury pools shimmering like a river, statues facing inward towards some long-erased chamber. And someone, nearly 2 millennia ago, sealing the place with meticulous care, as if protecting a secret, or perhaps hiding a failure. Above ground, the pyramids keep their silence. And yet, as the night deepens, another story swims faintly up from the dark, the account of obsidian workers who shaped ritual blades so sharp they could separate flesh from breath. The city thrived on this craft, turning volcanic glass into something luminous, almost supernatural in skilled hands. Some chroniclers suggest certain ceremonial obsidian mirrors were polished to such perfection that priests believed they could see distant realms reflected within. Others think the mirrors served as astronomical tools. A few whisper that they were portals, not literal ones, but symbolic, guiding initiates into trance-like journeys beyond the mundane. And so the Mercury River beneath the earth begins to feel like the reflection of these obsidian mirrors, their dark sheen mirrored in silver, their purpose mirrored in secrecy. We drift now toward the Pyramid of the Sun, its great steps rising like a mountain crafted by minds both practical and poetic. Excavations found that beneath its surface lies the memory of earlier temples, built, raised, rebuilt, as if each generation added layers not simply of stone but of ideology covering, reshaping, redirecting. And at the heart of the structure, long ago, there may have been a sacred cave, now collapsed, which some say symbolized the womb of creation. Why bury such a mythic core? Why erase the earliest meanings unless a later priesthood feared them? A cool wind slips between the stones, carrying dust from centuries of forgotten stories. And we, gentle travelers through this midnight documentary, sense that Teotihuacan is not hiding one secret but several. Perhaps the mercury was ritual, perhaps it was symbolic, perhaps it was something else entirely. But whatever it meant, the hands that carved this city understood something about death, or the cosmos, or the mind that later cultures chose not to remember. Above, the moon slides free of a thin cloud, brightening the city's geometric shadows. The pyramids remain unmoving, but they seem to inhale subtly, as though remembering. And somewhere deep in the sealed tunnels the mercury waits, still reflecting nothing and everything. Just beyond the Pyramid of the Sun, where the darkness thickens near the stone walls, a faint vibration hums through the ground, imagined, perhaps, yet persistent. A whisper that the next discovery might change the story once again, if the Earth chooses to give it back. Sumer's erased star maps. Dawn never truly arrives in Mesopotamia the way it does elsewhere. Instead, light creeps in gently. First a faint silver glow on the horizon, then a haze settling over the plains, softening the world as if ancient spirits requested a slower morning. And it is in this quiet bloom of grey-blue light that the remnants of Sumer, the world's first known civilization, reveal themselves not as ruins, but as memories etched into clay. A soft breath of desert wind drifts past the old ziggurats, stirring dust around the foundations of Ur and Eridu. The stones look tired, worn by nearly 6,000 years of sun, but still they hold their posture with a kind of delicate defiance. A lone star lingers low in the heavens, refusing to fade and echo, perhaps, of the very thing Sumer tried to map with such meticulous care. And as our narration glides closer, we enter a world where the line between astronomy and myth was once indistinguishable. The Sumerians were extraordinary skywatchers. Their nights were vast and unpolluted, their minds sharp with curiosity. They carved the heavens into patterns, built observatories atop stepped pyramids, tracked planetary motion with rhythms that would later guide Babylonian scholars. A simple astronomical tablet, dated to around 1800 BCE, shows their tracking of Venus with precision that would impress a modern mathematician. But alongside these mainstream achievements lies something older, stranger, something often pushed quietly aside. Deep in the British Museum and Istanbul archives, dusty drawers hold small clay tablets covered in dense, wedge-shaped cuneiform. Some offer star lists, constellations, omens tied to eclipses or lunar cycles. Yet a few tablets whisper of journeys, not merely observations. Some describe the gods crossing the sky in ships of fire. Others chart constellations not fully recognized in later astronomical traditions. A fringe theory, gently controversial, often dismissed, suggests that one particular set of tablets from ancient Nineveh may encode star positions predating Sumer itself. A scholar in the 20th century proposed that these maps might preserve memories of a sky from thousands of years earlier, before the Earth's slow axial wobble shifted the heavens. Mainstream experts refute this vigorously, pointing instead to scribal copying errors or poetic embellishment. And yet, the notion lingers. Because buried beneath these ziggurats, excavators once found star charts scratched into clay, so worn they crumbled at touch charts that seemed to hint at constellations long shifted from their ancient places. Were they ceremonial? Were they teaching tools? Or remnants of an older tradition adopted by the Sumerians? Scholars still debate whether these anomalies indicate lost knowledge, misunderstood symbolism, or simply the mind's eagerness to find patterns where none exist. But in the soft early light, with sand whispering against stone, the question feels more open than closed. We drift now into a lamplit hall inside a reconstructed ziggurat, imagining the amber glow of oil lamps reflecting off polished clay. Priests of the Ikur, Temple of Enlil, once knelt here, chiseling signs into fresh tablets. Their styluses moved quickly, fluidly, as though copying from an older source something memorized, something sacred, something not meant to be altered. One priest writes of a star cluster from which the gods descended. Another mentions a bright wanderer that pauses, disappears, and returns after long ages. A poetic metaphor, perhaps. Ancient mythology excelled at grand imagery, but the phrasing feels strangely precise, almost observational. At night, Sumerian astronomers learned scribes ascended the ziggurat steps. Lanterns swayed in their hands as they tracked celestial patterns. Their footing was sure, their eyes trained. They saw Jupiter as Marduk, Venus as Inanna, Saturn as Ninurta. But beyond the gods lay something more mathematical. They calculated, they predicted, they recorded. And then, quite suddenly, many early tablets vanish from the historical record. Some blame the Akkadian conquest around 2334 BCE. Others suggest decay, looting, fire. But a few whisper carefully that certain early astronomical tablets were deliberately broken, buried, or erased by priestly classes seeking to reshape cosmology. After all, once an empire rises, it often prefers myths aligned with its new narrative. There is an alluring detail from the 1922 excavations at Kish, a fragmentary tablet describing a star moving counter to the heavens. A mistranslation? Probably. A comet? Possibly. Or perhaps a scribal experiment. The fragment was catalogued quietly, then seldom mentioned. Its meaning remains uncertain, its context lost. Yet it hovers in the imagination like a small lantern carried up ancient stairs. We glide now to the ruins of Eridu, believed by some archaeologists to be the oldest city in Mesopotamia, one born of marshlands, where reeds swayed and fishermen cast nets under wide star fields. Here, local legends once spoke of a time before kings, before temples, before writing when priests listened to the sky directly. What this means remains unclear. Some think it refers to naked-eye astronomy. Others suspect a ritual tradition predating record-keeping. And some fringe theorists claim it hints at star lore inherited from an earlier, now-lost culture. But when we stand in the quiet dawn of Eridu's ruins, even if only in imagination, the silence carries a weight, as though something once vibrant fell deliberately still. Let us drift deeper. In a small museum in southern Iraq sits a humble clay tablet, its edges chipped, its symbols uneven. It seems unimportant at first glance, but a closer look reveals something peculiar. The tablet maps a star pattern not easily matched to modern constellations. Some scholars think it is stylized art. Others argue it was simply misdrawn. Yet there are those who believe it may represent a section of sky later obscured by precession, positioned not as it appeared in 2000 BCE, but as it may have appeared 10,000 years earlier. The air around the ziggurat seems to thicken with this thought, and suddenly the tablets, the erased maps, the vanished records begin to form a soft pattern, nothing definitive, nothing proven, but something like a whisper. Not everything we think we know was written in the first chapter. As we continue through this landscape of half-remembered stars, a quirkier detail emerges, one often mentioned by travelling antiquarians. Some early Mesopotamian seals depict strange winged discs, accompanied by priests pointing toward them. Mainstream interpretations suggest solar symbols or mythological motifs. But fringe voices offer bolder claims. They liken the winged disc to an object, not a symbol, something descending, something watched. Scholars sigh at such theories, noting their tendency toward dramatization. And yet, in the soft, dim light of our narrative, those tiny seals feel more mysterious than they appear in textbooks. The Sumerians, after all, were careful record keepers. When they meant myth, they said myth. When they meant ritual, they wrote ritual. But when they meant observation, they were astonishingly precise. And so, as the sun finally breaks over the plains, casting a pale blush across the old mud brick walls, we return to the central question. What knowledge did Sumer possess that later civilizations chose to ignore, reinvent, or quietly bury? Perhaps the erased star maps were simply lost to time. Perhaps they were poetic flights mistaken for science. Or perhaps, just perhaps, they preserved an ancient memory too complex, too contradictory, too inconvenient for later empires to embrace. The light brightens. The last visible stars fade. Yet somewhere in the fragile interface between myth and measurement, a faint glow lingers, as though one final mystery waits to rise again. Just as we begin to walk toward the colossal stones of Baalbek's titanic foundations. Even before the sun rises over Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, Baalbek seems awake, vast stones breathing out the night's cool air, their surfaces holding a faint sheen of starlight. As dawn drifts slowly across the horizon, the ruins emerge from the shadows not as scattered relics, but as giants reclining beneath a soft, amber sky. Wind moves through the pillars of the Temple of Jupiter, with a low, hollow hum, like a memory trying to speak through broken stone. From a distance, the complex appears grand. Up close, it becomes almost impossible. The trilithon, 3 stones, each weighing over 800 tons, lies at the heart of the mystery. Their size dwarfs the monoliths of Egypt, the obelisks of Rome, the blocks of Mycenae, and yet here they are, placed with uncanny precision atop even older stones, as if arranged by hands unconcerned with the limits of human strength. A later Roman layer crowns them, elegant and orderly, but beneath those classical columns rests something far older, something that feels like an echo from a forgotten world. The morning air, cool and thin, traces the outlines where ancient chisels once touched the stones, but the marks reveal little. Some appear Roman, some appear Phoenician. Some seem older still, too weathered, too ambiguous to assign to any known culture with certainty. The origins blur as softly as mist rising from the valley fields, and as our viewpoint glides toward the retaining wall beneath the great temple, a hush settles in. For here, the stones are not merely large, they are impossibly large. One, known today as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, lies half buried in a nearby quarry and weighs roughly 1,000 tons. More recently, another monolith was discovered beneath it, estimated to exceed 1,600 tons. Whoever shaped these giants intended to move them, but no ancient text, no tablet, no temple inscription explains why. And it is in this gap, this wide, deep silence, where theories drift like morning fog. Mainstream archaeologists offer grounded explanations. Perhaps the stones were part of a never-completed phase of monumental construction. Perhaps the Romans planned to move them, but abandoned the effort. These ideas are reasonable, tidy, yet they feel insufficient beneath the looming presence of the stones themselves, which seem carved for a purpose too monumental to fit easily within the limits of classical engineering. The sun climbs higher, warming the limestone surface, illuminating each groove, each weathered contour, and we walk slowly along the sinuous edges of the trilithon, sensing a rhythm in the placement. The stones align with an ancient terrace whose origins remain debated. Some propose Phoenician builders, others suggest an unknown Levantine culture predating them. Scholars still debate whether the megalithic foundations belong to a civilization older than recorded history, one whose architectural ambition has been mostly lost beneath layers of conquest. But the stones, still and silent, offer no correction. We drift now through the Roman colonnade, once the tallest in the empire, its Corinthian capitals broken but majestic. Roman engineers were proud of this temple. They left inscriptions of their accomplishments, their dedications, their devotion to Jupiter. Yet, in all their meticulous records, there is no boast about the trilithon, no mention of moving those monstrous blocks, no statement claiming the feat. Romans celebrated their triumphs loudly. Their silence here feels strangely deliberate, like a page torn from a manuscript. In the golden haze of morning, we turn gently toward the quarry just south of the complex. Dew clings to the grasses around the enormous stones still resting there. It lies at an angle, half embedded in the earth, as though it had been abandoned in mid-motion. Archaeologists once believed it was left unused because of imperfections. Later studies revealed it was perfectly shaped. But shaping a stone over 20 meters long is not an oversight. It is a declaration of skill, of intent, of audacity, and yet no one claims responsibility. Local folklore adds another voice. Stories stretch back generations of giants who built the platform, of supernatural beings who helped lift the stones, of thunder gods who once walked the terrace. These tales, told softly around village fires, blend with Roman myths, Phoenician deities, and even biblical echoes. Baalbek has always been a magnet for myth, drawing each era's imagination into its vast foundations. But myths rarely arise from quiet places. They grow where something incomprehensible stands. We continue our wandering, letting the warm air carry the fragrance of time and dust. The ruins cast long, soft shadows over the valley, their presence undeniable. And then we pause at a smaller, often overlooked detail. Certain stones bear faint circular marks, almost like pivot points or lifting sockets. Practical explanations abound. Roman levers, quarrying techniques, but some researchers note that the patterns appear uneven, mismatched across different layers, as though the terrace had been built in multiple ages using multiple approaches. A palimpsest of engineering, a layered memory. A few fringe theorists propose that the oldest stones were laid not for religious purposes, but for astronomical ones. They suggest alignments with solstitial angles, lunar cycles, or horizon markers. Mainstream scholars shake their heads. The data, they say, is inconclusive. But as we step back, letting the valley breeze cool our thoughts, the idea doesn't feel entirely out of place. The stones overlook mountain ranges that glow with dramatic seasonal changes, and ancient builders across continents had a talent for blending architecture with the heavens. A quirkier footnote emerges from 19th century travellers who sketched Baalbek by lantern light. Some claimed the trilithon stones rang softly when struck, like enormous tuning blocks. Modern acousticians find little support for such tales, and yet the descriptions persist in old journals, handwritten with astonished strokes. Perhaps the stones rang only in imagination, or perhaps their slight internal tension produced a faint resonance. Either way, the image lingers, giant stones humming under a starlit sky. As sunlight brightens the valley, we return gently to the temple's quiet heart. We see Roman carvings above, megalithic foundations below, and centuries of silence layered between. The ruins rise like a question suspended in amber. Who began this? And why did later empires choose to pretend they did not know? Some answer with caution, some with bold speculation. Yet none can escape the gravity of the stones themselves, stones too large to ignore, too silent to explain. And as the morning ripens into day, a soft tremor of thought moves through the mind. If a civilization capable of this once walked these valleys, what else might they have built that now lies forgotten beneath dust and myth? We linger a moment longer, listening to the breeze whisper through broken columns. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, we turn toward a darker horizon, toward a world swallowed by water, where no stones remain standing. Doggerland is calling, Doggerland's submerged echoes. Before Europe had borders, before the North Sea roared between its coasts, a vast green world stretched from modern Britain to the Netherlands, a world of rivers, marshes, forests, and quiet human footsteps. Today we call it Doggerland, though no ancient soul knew such a name. To them, it was home, a boundless plain beneath an ever-changing sky, where mammoths once wandered through wind-blown grass, and Mesolithic families followed seasonal tides of fish and deer. But now, that world lies drowned beneath grey waves. The North Sea, restless and cold, murmurs over the vanished land as if trying to speak the memories it swallowed. At dawn, its surface glows pewter, hiding the contours of a continent that once connected millions of lives across millennia. Occasionally, fishermen hauling nets from the deep find remnants, a carved antler, a polished flint blade, fragments of ancient peat, artifacts that feel impossibly personal, like whispers trapped in silt. And tonight, or rather, in this soft, cinematic drift of narration, Doggerland rises again in our imagination, its foggy fields glowing under the first stirrings of pale sunlight. We begin with quiet steps along a shoreline that no longer exists. Grass bends in a primordial breeze. Distant marshland birds echo through the morning. This is Europe not yet divided by water, a memory of an age when coastlines wandered with the ice and humans moved with the rhythms of seasons rather than maps. Around 8000 BCE, as the last ice age retreated, meltwaters surged across the land. Sea levels rose quickly, sometimes inches in a lifetime, sometimes feet. People living here would have felt the world shifting beneath them. Rivers widened, shorelines retreated, marshes expanded. Yet they adapted, building temporary settlements along lakes, crafting fine microliths, decorating antler tools with curving lines that seemed to echo the movement of water itself. But something happened, something faster, louder, more violent. A massive undersea landslide known as the Storegga Slide, occurring near Norway around 6200 BCE, triggered towering tsunamis that swept across Doggerland. Scholars still debate whether this catastrophe was the final blow or merely one chapter in a long drowning. But the waters surged, erasing valleys, swamping entire regions, snapping ancient forests at their roots. What had been a vast plain became, in the span of a few human generations, a cold and rising sea. The land disappeared. The stories disappeared with it. Yet the silence it left behind seems almost intentional, as though the sea wished to hide a chapter of human history beneath its waves. We shift our vision gently now down, through the rippling water, into the dim green twilight where Doggerland sleeps. Silt drifts like slow snowfall. Long buried peat layers lie preserved beneath the seabed, holding pollen, seeds, and microscopic traces of vanished ecosystems. Geologists trace ancient river channels, the Schotten River, the Fleuve Manche that once braided across this landscape. With sonar scans, they map old lake basins, marsh systems, and coastlines lost for 10,000 years. The image feels quiet, solemn, untouched, and yet something deeper stirs, hints that Doggerland was more than a simple Mesolithic hunting ground. A few researchers propose that this region may have held some of the earliest permanent settlements in northern Europe, perhaps linked by trade routes stretching astonishing distances. Antler carvings found offshore resemble patterns seen in Denmark. Flint tools match styles from the Rhine Valley. A single piece of preserved woven material, fragile as moth wings, suggests craftsmanship unexpectedly advanced for its era. But the sea keeps its secrets well. Divers exploring the silty depths often describe a strange sensation, as if walking across a ghost landscape. They speak of stumps of ancient trees still rooted in the seabed, their surfaces preserved like black glass. They describe peat beds that crumble at a touch, releasing air trapped before the pyramids were imagined. In rare cases, they find bones of mammoth, deer, and yes, of humans worn smooth by the tides. A fringe but fascinating theory whispers of older human activity, possibly even pre-Ice Age structures now buried deeply beneath later flood deposits. This idea remains speculative at best, and is treated cautiously by academics. Yet, one quirk keeps it afloat. A single, large worked flint, dredged in the 1,930 seconds, that did not match known Mesolithic technologies. Was it misidentified, misplaced, or evidence of deeper, older layers? The answer remains elusive. Scholars still debate whether Doggerland was simply a sparse hunting territory or a vibrant cultural corridor, a place where myths later echoed across early European societies. Some linguists even wonder if ancient flood stories scattered through Indo-European and Near Eastern traditions preserve faint memories of lands swallowed by rising seas at the end of the Ice Age. We imagine now a Mesolithic settlement perched beside a wide river. Smoke drifts from a small hearth. Children trace patterns in the sand. Hunters nap flint beneath a leaning oak. And in the distance, the sea inches closer, silent, inexorable. A mother teaching her child to gather reeds may have paused one morning, noticing the shoreline had moved. A fisherman returning at dusk may have found the marsh deeper than it had been the week before. Change would have seemed gradual, until it wasn't. The Storegga tsunami, geologists say, may have sent waves as high as 10 meters racing across the plains. Imagine standing in grassland and hearing that first distant roar, an unfamiliar sound, growing louder, heavier, vibrating through the earth like a giant's breath. Imagine having only moments to run, to cling to something, to survive. Those who lived would have carried the memory for generations. But memories fade, and when land disappears entirely, only story remains. Story or silence. As we glide back upward, Breaching the surface of the North Sea once more, we hear the modern world faintly humming. The engines of fishing boats, the distant churn of ferries. None realize they pass over forgotten rivers, forgotten homes, forgotten paths. And yet, Doggerland speaks to us in small, persistent ways. A fisherman near the Dogger Bank might pull up a piece of ancient reindeer bone. A trawler might catch a sculpted antler point. A dredging operation might uncover worked timbers from a drowned forest. The sea, in these brief moments, seems to return fragments of the world it buried. A quirky detail from 20th century reports describes the occasional retrieval of what locals once called bog fairy wood so waterlogged and blackened that it looked almost petrified. Many had no idea they were holding the remains of trees that once grew in Doggerland's forests 10 millennia ago. Even the peat, dredged in clumps, sometimes held seeds that when examined matched species long vanished from Britain's natural landscape. Every artifact is a hand reaching from the past, and yet something remains incomplete, as though Doggerland still hides a final truth beneath its shifting sands. Perhaps there are settlements waiting to be discovered, preserved beneath layers of silt. Perhaps more advanced craft traditions flourished here than we imagine. Or perhaps the greatest secret is simply the reminder that human history is not a clean line, but a coastline ever changing, ever eroding, ever renewed. The North Sea darkens slightly. As clouds move in from the west, a low rumble rolls across the waves, echoing faintly like a long-ago tsunami's ghost. The waters shimmer, pale and grey, concealing a world that once glowed with life. And as we drift away from Doggerland's submerged plains, the sea seems to rise 1 inch higher, as though following us, calling us deeper. Ahead, high in the thin, cold air of the Andes, a different mystery is waiting, carved not by water, but by hands whose precision defies every expectation. Puma Punku beckons. Puma Punku's precision enigma. High on the Bolivian altiplano over 12,000 feet above sea level, the air thins into something almost sacred. Each breath tastes of cold stone, wide sky, and millennia of unanswered questions. And in this harsh, wind-sharpened silence lies Puma Punku, a ruin so strange that even approaching it feels like stepping into a forgotten geometry. The dawn comes slowly here. The horizon glows a dusky rose, then deepens into gold, revealing scattered blocks of andesite and red sandstone, as though some cosmic sculptor left their tools in mid-creation. The stones lie half-buried, half-toppled, arranged not by chance, but by a deliberate order long since broken. The light catches the edges first. Razor-straight cuts, perfectly angled corners, deep recesses shaped with such care that they look machine-made even to modern eyes. The wind gathers along the plateau, sliding between the fragments. It murmurs through the stone channels, producing a soft, almost plaintive whistle as though the site remembers a harmony now missing from the world. Puma Punku, part of the greater Tiwanaku complex, is often dated to around 500–600 CE, though some archaeological layers suggest earlier foundations. The Tiwanaku culture built much of what we see, but the exact origin of the most precise stones remains a subject of debate. Walk among them, and each one feels like a challenge. Perfect 90-degree angles, drill-like holes, interlocking shapes that seem designed for assembly, as though the entire platform once fit together like a colossal three-dimensional puzzle. And so we begin, gently, as all good mysteries do, by tracing the edges with patience. The most famous blocks here are the H blocks, massive andesite shapes, carved with serene, mathematical elegance. Each has identical proportions, identical cutouts, identical recesses, suggesting mass production. Yet the Tiwanaku people used stone tools and copper chisels. Andesite ranks much harder than copper, and while experienced craftsmen can indeed work hard stone with persistence, the speed, consistency, and symmetry displayed here remain baffling. Mainstream archaeologists insist the work was done with hand tools, abrasive sand, and extraordinary skill, nothing more. And in many ways, they are right. Human ingenuity is vast, especially when guided by ritual purpose. But walk through Puma Punku, and even the most grounded observer feels a moment of disbelief. The crisp interior corners, the long, smooth grooves, the flawless fit between blocks now scattered by time or earthquake. Scholars still debate whether these stones were shaped entirely by Tiwanaku artisans, or whether they inherited earlier foundations, perhaps from a culture whose memory has not survived in the archaeological record. The plateau grows brighter as the sun lifts. Shadows retreat, revealing a pattern subtle but undeniable in the arrangement of scattered blocks. Some align with the cardinal directions, some echo astronomical angles. A few researchers argue that Pumapunku may have once formed a ceremonial gateway or elevated platform, its structures oriented towards solstice sunrise points. But erosion, seismic activity, and past looting have fragmented the layout, leaving only questions in the wind. The wind, in fact, seems to be the only thing that moves freely here. It drifts over the stones, slipping into narrow channels carved with unearthly precision. Some of these grooves resemble conduits or tracks, though their purpose remains unknown. Others form recesses so geometric that they resemble modular joints, as if the blocks were meant to interlock in ways now forgotten. A quirky discovery noted in early 20th century field reports described small fragments of tufa andesite, glass-smooth surfaces, showing signs that some sections may have been polished using unknown techniques. Later studies propose abrasive slurry or natural polishing by wind and sand, but the effect remains uncanny, especially when sunlight catches the sheen and reflects faintly like water. And speaking of water, another hallmark of Tiwanaku engineering was hydrology. Channels and basins throughout the region show that water played a central role in ritual, agriculture, and possibly cosmology. Some researchers propose that Pumapunku's intricate recesses were part of water flow systems designed to reflect the heavens. Imagine it. A platform shimmering with still pools, stars mirrored on its surface, priests walking along polished stone as constellations shimmered at their feet. Perhaps water traced the grooves. Perhaps it pooled in the precision-cut basins. Perhaps it formed a celestial model in stone and reflection of the world above. But then why the modular blocks? Why the interlocking joints? Wind moves again, threading through the ruins, carrying whispers of a civilization whose stories survive only in fragments. Tiwanaku itself thrived from roughly 200 CE to 1000 CE, reaching its apex around the same time medieval Europe was beginning to shape kingdoms. Their influence spread across the Andes, agricultural innovation, social organization, ceremonial centers, and yet they left almost no written language. Their legacy arrives to us through stone, pottery, and 1,000 quiet puzzles. We walk now along one of the longest andesite slabs, its edges straight as a modern ruler. Some fringe theorists claim laser-like cutting, but such leaps often ignore the patience of ancient craft. And yet, something about the consistency, the uniformity, the measured perfection suggests a tradition of stonework honed to a level unmatched elsewhere in the ancient Americas. One researcher noted that particular recesses match with uncanny precision to corresponding protrusions, almost like architectural male-female joints, not decorative, structural. This suggests the entire platform may once have been earthquake-resistant, its stones locked into place like a giant andesite jigsaw. If true, then Pumapunku was not simply ceremonial, it was engineering on an advanced scale. But the earthquakes came anyway. Time came anyway. The platform shattered. We linger beside a half-buried block, whose surface bears small drilled depressions. Not deep enough for modern drill bits, but circular, clean, purposeful. Experiments show such holes can be made with hand tools and tubes rotating with abrasive slurry. Yet the speed implied by their number, alignment, and uniformity sparks debate even among conservative scholars. And so, slowly, we step back, letting the panorama unfold. Giant stones scattered like the pieces of a game lost to memory. A civilization that reached immense sophistication without leaving a written trace. And beneath it all, older layers, possible remnants of a site used long before Tiwanaku rose to prominence. A fringe hypothesis once proposed that Pumapunku might be much older, perhaps 12,000 years, dating back to a pre-Younger Dryas society. Mainstream archaeologists maintain there is no evidence for such antiquity in the stratigraphy. But the idea persists in documentaries, books, late-night discussions. It persists, perhaps, because Pumapunku feels older than its assigned dates. It feels primordial. It feels inherited. We move now to one final detail, a detail often overlooked, yet quietly captivating. A single stone bears what looks like a tiny carving of a humanoid figure with an elongated hat. Some say a priest, others say a deity. But there is something subtly mechanical about the lines, almost schematic, too stylized for realism, too precise for casual carving. Was it symbolic? Was it a joke? Was it a mark left by a stonemason with a flair for abstraction? Or was it, like the entire site, a fragment of meaning we no longer have the key to decipher? The wind rises. It sweeps across the plateau, stirring dust into thin spirals that drift like spirits between the stones. And as we prepare to leave, a faint tremor of curiosity lingers in the chest, warm and insistent. If this was possible at the roof of the world, what else might lie hidden in the mountains, drowned in lakes, or buried beneath centuries of silence? We take one last look at the precision-cut blocks. The sun reaches its zenith, casting harsh shadows that sharpen every edge. And for a brief moment, the stones seem to align, as if remembering their old configuration, their vanished purpose, their lost harmony. Then the wind breaks the illusion, and somewhere far away, beneath the earth of Anatolia, an underground world waits, dark, vast, and carved by hands, preparing for a different kind of mystery. Derinkuyu calls from the depths. Derinkuyu's labyrinth of depths. Night falls differently over Cappadocia. It doesn't rush down from the sky, it seeps outward from the earth, rising from the volcanic valleys and soft, chalk-coloured ridges, as though the land itself exhales darkness. The air cools quickly, the stars come early, and beneath those stars lies a world hidden not above ground, but far below it, Derinkuyu, the deepest of Anatolia's underground cities. A faint moonlit glow settles over the town's quiet streets, but the real story begins when we descend slowly, step by step, into a stone-carved throat leading into the earth. The tunnel feels narrow at first, low-ceilinged, designed to humble the body before the mind, but soon the passage opens into a world that should not exist on such a scale. Derinkuyu is not a cave. It is not even a network of caves. It is a city, an engineered multi-level labyrinth dropping 18 stories beneath the surface, carved into soft volcanic tuff, with such precision that even today, centuries after abandonment, many of its tunnels stand smooth, stable, almost eerily intact. Archaeologists estimate its earliest layers may date to the first millennium BCE, though some believe the foundations could be far older, possibly linked to the mysterious Phrygians, or even earlier, pre-Iron Age communities whose names have vanished. We descend further. The air cools and thickens, carrying a faint mineral scent. Each step echoes softly, like distant footsteps following behind. Oil lamps once burned here, thousands of them casting flickering light along the walls. Families lived in these depths. They cooked, worked, studied, prayed. Some estimates suggest 20,000 to 30,000 people could have sheltered here during times of crisis, sustained by wells, wine cellars, stables, communal kitchens, and ingenious ventilation shafts that plunge straight upward like chimneys reaching for the sky. The stone around us seems to shift from amber to grey as we go lower. The tunnels narrow again, deliberately. Derinkuyu was designed not only for refuge but for defence. Intruders would be forced to approach single file. At the end of certain passages, massive circular doors, solid stone discs weighing up to half a ton, could be rolled into place. These doors still sit in their grooves, quiet as sleeping guardians. We stop before one. Its carved centre hole looks like the pupil of a stone eye, watching the centuries pass. Who built this place? And why so deep? Mainstream explanations suggest Derinkuyu served as a refuge during invasions. Persian armies, Roman conflicts, Arab-Byzantine wars, all plausible, all logical. Yet the depth, scale, and engineering seem far beyond what a community would construct solely for episodic shelter. These tunnels feel intentional, almost ceremonial, as though they emerged from a long-standing tradition rather than a single era's necessity. Scholars still debate whether the earliest phases originated as simple storage chambers, later expanded into a complex system. Others propose a more radical idea, that the underground network was built in anticipation of recurring catastrophes, perhaps environmental rather than military. The volcanic history of Cappadocia, including ancient eruptions of Mount Ursius, lends credence to the possibility of people seeking long-term refuge from ash storms or toxic gases. But as we move deeper into Derinkuyu, the atmosphere suggests something more. We pass through a low corridor into a chamber, tall enough to stand comfortably, its ceiling rising like a dome in darkness. The room once served as a school. Archaeologists found niches where students might have sat, learning in the dim glow of lamps. Further along lies a vast communal hall, with soot still clinging to walls, marking where fires once warmed whole families. And then we encounter something curious, rooms carved not simply for practicality, but with architectural flair. Arches, vaulted ceilings, symmetry, planning. This is not survival carved in haste. This is design. A gentle turn takes us to one of Derinkuju's most astonishing features. A multi-level ventilation system so advanced that it maintains breathable air even today. One central shaft drops 55 meters, branching into dozens of smaller ducts. Engineers who study it marvel at the airflow, at how every chamber, even those deep in the Earth's throat, remains oxygenated. Some shafts double as communication lines, allowing sound to travel between levels. A whisper in one chamber can sometimes drift faintly into another 2 stories below. It feels like standing inside a living organism. A quirky detail emerges from 1,960 renovations. Workers clearing debris stumbled upon a section of tunnel that had been intentionally collapsed. Behind it lay another series of chambers, stranger, narrower, less finished. Some believe they represent older phases. Others think they were abandoned expansions. A few enthusiasts, more imaginative than cautious, whisper that these spaces were sealed, for reasons best left undisturbed. While such claims lean toward folklore, they add a haunting layer to the already deep mystery. We reach the stables, now a large, sloped chamber, where animals once sheltered. The air here feels warmer, heavier, with the ghost of centuries-old breath. Grooves carved into the floors suggest tethering points, and feeding niches are still visible. It is one thing to imagine people hiding underground. It is another to imagine entire herds doing the same. The deeper we go, the quieter it becomes. Human senses shift in the dark. The walls feel closer. Footsteps soften. The mind grows alert, listening for whispers that may not be there. And yet, at Derinkuju's lowest levels, a profound calm settles in a sensation of being protected, encapsulated, held by the earth like a memory preserved in stone. The lowest chamber, so far as archaeologists have explored, may have served as a tomb, or a sanctuary, or perhaps a final refuge. Its purpose remains unclear. The stones there are smooth, unadorned, almost meditative. A stillness hangs in the air, broken only by the faint exhale of distant ventilation. We stand in that quiet and feel the weight of centuries pressing lightly on our shoulders. The engineering speaks, the purpose hums beneath the surface, and yet the story remains incomplete. Why such scale? Why such depth? Why build an entire city underground when the world above stretched wide and open across the Anatolian plains? Perhaps the inhabitants feared more than soldiers. Perhaps they feared the sky, ash clouds, blinding dust storms, or cosmic omens recorded in older traditions. Some fringe theories suggest ancient peoples retreated underground after environmental cataclysms now lost to history. Others hint at rituals of descent, the symbolic journey into the underworld found in many Near Eastern myths. Derinkuju offers no direct answers, only the quiet, deliberate shape of its tunnels. And as we begin our ascent back toward the surface, climbing through narrow passages that suddenly widen into broad communal halls, the cool air shifts from subterranean chill to moonlit breeze. We emerge beneath a star-dusted sky, the strange beauty of Cappadocia stretching out in undulating silhouettes. Above us, the world feels vast again, open, airy, unknowable. Below us, in darkness, a city sleeps. A city waiting for a reason long forgotten. And far to the east, beneath the restless Pacific, another mystery stirs its steps, carved in stone beneath the waves, its edges softened by tides yet too deliberate to dismiss. Yonaguni awaits. Yonaguni's oceanic carvings. The sea around Yonaguni moves with a slow, deliberate pulse, as though the Pacific itself were breathing. At dusk, the water turns a deep iron blue, and the currents sliding past Japan's westernmost island whisper against the cliffs, like a quiet tide of forgotten stories. Out here, at the edge of the archipelago, nothing feels entirely anchored. The wind carries scents of coral, distant rain, and something older, something that seems to hover just beneath the waves. When the sun sinks, the last rays paint the sea in a haunting bronze, and beneath that shimmering skin, an ancient structure waits. Not a shipwreck, not a reef, something else. The divers who first saw it in the late 1980s spoke of descending through clear, turquoise water, only to find themselves staring at a massive, tiered geometry rising from the ocean floor. Walls, terraces, stair-like formations so sharp, so angular, so perfect, that they felt like the submerged remains of a forgotten city. They surfaced breathless, disoriented, trying to reconcile the impossible. An underwater monument of carved stone lying roughly 25 meters below the surface, shaped with a geometry that defied natural explanation. And so tonight, in our slow journey through ancient mysteries, we dive with them. The water grows cooler as we descend. Light fades into aquamarine haze. Fish flicker around us like drifting sparks. Then, out of the blue, the first silhouette appears. A vast rectangular mass, with stone-like steps, rising in broad, layered platforms. The edges are clean, the angles sharp, the symmetry unmistakable. This is the Yonaguni monument, a labyrinth of terraces, ledges, columns, and corridors known locally as Iseki Point, the ruins point. Yet the debate that surrounds it is as deep as the water that hides it. Some geologists insist that the structure is natural. The island's sandstone erodes in horizontal and vertical fractures, creating flat plains and step-like patterns. And indeed, the rock type does lend itself to geometric forms. But when you drift along the monument's sheer walls, tracing the uncanny precision of its cuts, the natural explanation comfort fades just a little. Because the site doesn't look like a single fractured block, it looks like a blueprint. And blueprints rarely emerge from accident. We glide along the grand staircase, a broad ascent that feels ceremonial, almost theatrical. Each step drops in clean rectangular tiers, creating a corridor that leads toward an upper platform, resembling a plaza. Some divers describe it as standing on the roof of a temple submerged for millennia. Others say it feels like walking through the foundations of an Atlantean palace. The impressions vary, but the effect is always the same. A sense that the structure isn't just rock, it's intention. Nearby lies a feature known as the stage, a tall, flat-topped platform with vertical walls so straight they could pass for modern masonry. Below it extends a sharp-edged trench often called the road, its sides so parallel they resemble engineered passageways. Even natural formation proponents admit the site is uncanny. Yet whether the monument is man-made, modified, or entirely natural remains one of the great unresolved questions of undersea archaeology. Scholars still debate whether Yonaguni's geometry is the result of tectonic uplift and erosion, ritual shaping by ancient coastal cultures, or a combination of both, nature providing the canvas, humans applying the final cuts. As we drift downward, we reach the massive lower terraces. The water grows darker, cooler. The monument looms like a sleeping titan. Fish swim in and out of square openings that resemble doorways. Sand accumulates in carved channels that look oddly deliberate. A peculiar triangular carving lies near the base, its lines symmetrical and sharp. Natural? Possibly. But the eye hesitates. One of the quirkiest details often mentioned by divers is a cluster of parallel cut marks on a large block near the southwestern edge. The marks are so evenly spaced that some imaginations leap toward tool use, perhaps a form of stone splitting. Geological explanations note that wave abrasion and tectonic shearing can mimic such patterns, and yet the marks rest on a flat, platform-like surface that feels strangely intentional, like a half-finished engraving. We now follow a narrow passage nicknamed the hallway, a trench whose walls rise high above us in vertical planes. Here, the water feels still, contained. The corridor bends slightly, leading to an open courtyard-like depression. The shapes shift gradually, becoming less formal, more eroded. Nature's touch grows stronger as human interpretation grows weaker. This is Yonaguni's duality. Natural formation tinted with the possibility of human presence. A geological marvel tinted with a whisper of civilization. As we explore deeper, a haunting thought rises. If this monument is artificial, or even partially artificial, what does that say about the people who built it? If human hands shaped these terraces, then construction must have occurred when sea levels were much lower during the last ice age, between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. That would push Yonaguni into a timeline far earlier than known Japanese settlements of similar scale. It would imply a coastal culture capable of stone engineering, long before such capabilities are expected in the archaeological record. It is no wonder, then, that mainstream academia stays cautious, and yet the sea holds its own evidence. Near Yonaguni, divers have discovered stone circles arranged intentionally. Some believe on nearby shallower seafloors. Others have found what appear to be quarry-like features. On land, the island hosts ancient stone tombs and enigmatic petroglyphs, though none directly linked to the monument. But the hints tease the imagination, pulling us deeper. The monument itself is vast, 70 meters long, 25 meters tall, and swimming along its edges creates the uncanny sensation of walking through an ancient citadel now drowned by fate. We rise slightly, circling back toward the topmost tier. Light brightens, shadows sharpen along the edges of the steps. The monument feels alive again, its upper surfaces catching the last golden rays filtering through the water. Some researchers propose a middle ground theory, that Yonaguni's broad form is natural, but its sharp corners and certain features like the stage, the hallway, and various recesses were modified by humans. This compromise satisfies neither strict naturalists nor bold diffusionists, but it carries a quiet plausibility. Nature creates patterns, humans refine them. The line between natural and artificial isn't always clean. Sometimes it is blurred by purpose, but beneath the waves, when the light shifts just right, the structure appears unified, as though shaped with a single intention. We gently ascend now, drifting upward through the blue. The monument recedes beneath us, returning to its role as a silent guardian of the deep. The water around Yonaguni stirs with currents, bringing in new sand, new shadows. And as we break the surface, breathing the cool air beneath gathering clouds, a final question lingers like salt on the tongue. If Yonaguni once belonged to a coastal people whose world was swallowed by rising seas, what other monuments from other coasts, other ages, might lie hidden beneath the planet's shifting shorelines? The ocean whispers no answers, but high in the Andes, the sun watches over a different mystery, one carved not beneath waves, but in the thin breath of the high plateau, where a celestial gate waits with toppled stones and unspoken meanings. Tiwanaku is ready. Tiwanaku's solar gate secrets. Dawn on the Altiplano comes with a strange, weightless stillness, as though the thin air above Lake Titicaca hesitates for a moment before accepting the sun. Shadows stretch long across the high plain, brushing cold fingers over scattered stones, over half-buried foundations, and finally, over the solemn eye of the gateway of the Sunday. Its carved andesite surface, weathered yet enduring, glows faintly under the first light, as if waking from an ancient meditation. Here, in the vast, sacred landscape of Tiwanaku, quiet isn't just an absence of sound. It is a presence, a force. The winds of the Andean plateau move gently across the ruins, carrying dust, thin sunlight, and the echoes of a civilization whose memory has eroded like the carvings on stone. Tiwanaku, flourishing around 500–1000 CE, was once the heart of a culture woven with astronomy, agriculture, and symbolism older than the great Inca Empire. But the ruins we see today, sunken courtyards, towering monoliths, finely carved blocks, are but fragments of its former soul. And among these fragments stands the most enigmatic, a massive single-piece megalith known as the Puerta del Sol, or the Gate of the Sunday. We approach quietly, as though entering a shrine. The gate rises nearly 10 feet high, carved from a single slab of dark andesite weighing several tons. Its face is a tapestry of intricate glyphs, stepped motifs, and dominated at its center by a solemn figure often interpreted as the staff god, the central deity of the Andean cosmos. Rays emanate from its head, some ending in circles, some in zigzags like a celestial crown. Beneath this figure, 30-some smaller winged attendants march in silent procession, but the whole gate is broken, split cleanly in half, as though by some ancient blow. The break seems deliberate, or perhaps catastrophic, and beneath the fractured lintel, we feel the quiet gravity of a story that has not yet been fully told. The Gate of the Sun may not have always stood where we see it today. Archaeological evidence hints it was toppled in the distant past, maybe deliberately, maybe by earthquake, and later re-erected in a different position. This repositioning complicates the astronomical alignment theories that surround it, yet those theories persist, shimmering like heat mirages across the scholarly horizon. Some researchers propose that the gate functioned as a sophisticated solar calendar. The iconography, tight, mathematical, repeating, feels almost coded. A series of rectangular niches might correspond to days of the year. Certain lines may mark solstices, and a few theorists, studying the pattern with obsessive devotion, claim the carvings encode a 290-day cycle, perhaps linked to agricultural rhythms or ceremonial timings. Scholars still debate whether these interpretations hold weight, or are simply the projections of modern minds eager to find order in ancient art. But the mystery persists, fed by the precision with which Tiwanaku aligned many of its structures with celestial events. Solstice shadows, equinox markers, and stellar orientations are woven into the architecture of nearby temples, like the Kalasasaya. Even the site's orientation toward the cardinal directions feels deliberate, ritualistic, and so, as the sun climbs, the gate's carved shadows shift, gently silent evidence of forgotten astronomical knowledge. We wander now into the larger Tiwanaku complex. Stone blocks, some weighing more than 100 tons, lie scattered across terraces and plazas, their surfaces carved with shapes that seem both geometric and symbolic. Many were quarried from quarries miles away, brought here through methods still uncertain. Engineering estimates suggest the use of llama caravans, reed sledges, and community labor. But some of the blocks are so large that even these explanations feel strained. Andesite, the same volcanic stone used at Pumapunku, dominates here as well. Hard, durable, resistant to erosion, yet shaped with a precision reminiscent of the enigmatic blocks we saw earlier. Smooth planes, sharp corners, grooves carved like the strokes of an invisible compass. Tiwanaku's grandeur once radiated across the entire region. Its agricultural innovation, raised field farming, capable of withstanding harsh, high-altitude climate, supported a population that may have surpassed 40,000. Its reach extended through ceremonial exchanges and trade networks, tying the highlands to coastal regions and jungle lowlands. But the heart of Tiwanaku was always its cosmology. The Andes are places of sky worship. Horizon lines become sacred, mountains become ancestors, and in Tiwanaku, the sky was carved into stone. A quirky archaeological aside notes that some monoliths hold faint circular depressions, perhaps decorative, perhaps markers for offerings. Others bear stylized faces with tear-like rays descending from the eyes, interpreted by some as weeping sun gods. These motifs, replicated across artifacts, hint at rituals that bound heaven and earth into a single narrative thread. And now, standing at the gate of the sun, that thread tightens. The staff god, with its radiating headdress and symmetrical arms, may represent the axis mundi, the center of the world, the bridge between realms, or perhaps it maps celestial events, or seasons, or something more obscure, a cosmological cycle whose meaning has thinned across centuries. One researcher proposed that the gate's celestial imagery may represent a lost calendar of 11 months, each encoded in the smaller figures. Another argues the gate tracks the slow cycle of precession, the Earth's long wobble through the heavens. Others dismiss these theories entirely, noting the gate's damaged condition and uncertain placement complicate any astronomical reading. But even skeptics admit the gate feels like a tool, something meant to measure, or signal, or teach. We slip around the side of the gate to examine its reverse. Less ornate, more weathered. The mystery deepens. Nearby, a broken monolith lies partially buried in the earth. Its face bears faint engravings, lines that seem to radiate outward, like ripples or rays. Archaeologists discovered it had been intentionally buried sometime during Tiwanaku's decline, as though the people wished to hide it, protect it, or silence it. Why bury sacred stones? Why conceal astronomical markers? Perhaps the belief system shifted. Perhaps the priesthood lost power. Or perhaps the symbols encoded warnings about drought, about famine, about celestial cycles that grew ominous. Around 1100 CE, Tiwanaku collapsed. Climate stress, political upheaval, shifts in rainfall patterns, all likely contributors. But the fall was sudden enough that the site became abandoned, its stones later looted or repurposed by the Inca and Spanish. The Gate of the Sun endured, though fractured and toppled. We return to it once more as the sun reaches its zenith. The rays strike its carvings at an angle that brings out faint details. Dots, diamonds, stepped motifs, reminiscent of lightning or mountains. The staff god's face appears stern, yet contemplative. The small winged beings beneath it seem to march through time like messengers. A legend whispered among local Aymara communities tells that the gate once marked the entrance to a sacred realm, not metaphorical but cosmological, a threshold between cycles of the sun. They say the gate fell when the world's balance was broken, when the old calendar failed, when the cosmic order shifted. Of course, legends are not evidence, yet they echo the possibility gently, quietly, that Tiwanaku preserved a knowledge we can no longer read. We step back. The wind moves again, rustling the tough altiplano grasses. The sky opens wide above the ruins, pale and endless. And for a moment, the gate of the sun feels less like a relic and more like a presence, an eye gazing toward a celestial order that modern minds can only guess. Somewhere behind us, a shadow moves, not a person, but a memory of a procession long vanished. Priests, observers, astronomers, those who knew how to read the symbols carved into the gate, those who understood the rhythm of the heavens. We turn slowly. The plateau stretches toward a horizon where the mountains grow sharper, darker. The air cools again, and a soft intuition tells us the next story awaits far to the northwest, in a place where empires inscribed their triumphs but erased their origins. Hattusa calls from the Anatolian highlands, carrying clay tablets and the quiet riddle of a language wrapped in secrecy. Hattusa's clay codebreakers. Morning in central Anatolia carries a different kind of chill, one that feels older than weather, older than stone. Here, the wind drifts over a high, rugged plateau, threading through oak groves and scattering dust across broken ramparts. And rising from that windswept landscape, half swallowed by grass and time, stands Hattusa, the ancient capital of the Hittite Empire. From afar, its ruins resemble the ribs of a great stone beast, its bones bleached beneath the sun, its secrets buried beneath centuries of silence. As the first light spreads across the hills, the city reveals itself. Colossal gateways adorned with lions and sphinxes, cyclopean walls snaking across the terrain, and the faint outlines of temples where thousands once gathered in ritual reverence. The great temple of the storm god towers above the ruins in carved memory alone, its foundations still whispering of rites performed beneath torchlight. Yet for all its grandeur, Hattusa's most puzzling legacy isn't its architecture. It is its clay tablets, dense, wedge-shaped testaments to a civilization that spoke in riddles and ruled with steel. We step carefully through the shadowed remains of the Buyukale, the ancient citadel. The stones here hold echoes of kings Suppiluliuma, I Mursili II, Hattusili III, names that stir faint recognition in the annals of Bronze Age history. But it wasn't until 1906, during German excavations, that the world discovered Hattusa's true treasure, a vast archive of more than 30,000 cuneiform tablets, buried in palace storerooms like a forgotten library of clay. Some tablets recount laws, rituals, treaties, including a peace treaty with Egypt's Ramses II, signed around 1258 BCE, one of the oldest surviving international agreements. Others record myths, hymns, and diplomatic correspondence. Yet amid these well-understood texts lies a smaller, far more mysterious set tablets, written in languages that remain undeciphered, scripts that resist translation, and fragments that hint at cultures older than the Hittites themselves. And so we pause, in a half-collapsed chamber, dust motes drifting in golden shafts of morning light, and imagine a scribe kneeling before a clay tablet pressing wedges into its soft surface with quiet purpose. What knowledge were they encoding? And who, precisely, was meant to read it? The Hittites, though powerful, were inheritors as much as conquerors. They adopted the cuneiform system from Mesopotamia, but they also preserved older scripts like Hattic, a language with no known relatives. Embedded within the archives are hymns and rituals written in this enigmatic tongue, whispered praises to gods whose names do not appear elsewhere. Scholars classify Hattic as a language isolate, but some suggest it may preserve traces of a pre-Indo-European culture that lived in Anatolia long before the Hittite Empire rose. Scholars still debate whether Hattic survives in fragments only because the Hittites revered it, or whether they feared erasing something sacred, something that even they did not fully understand. We move now deeper into the ruins, toward the storerooms where thousands of tablets were found. The shelves are long gone, but the memory remains in the uneven stone recesses. Here, tablets were baked by accident when invading forces set the palace ablaze. Fire, so often the enemy of records, became the preserver. The clay hardened, freezing the words in time. Among the archives is a peculiar group known as the enigmatic tablets. Some contain sequences of signs that do not match Hittite, Akkadian, or Hattic conventions. Others use symbols that seem closer to pictographs than to cuneiform. One tablet appears to mix languages in a code-like pattern, alternating between styles, as though concealing meaning behind familiar forms. Some archaeologists believe these represent ritual or musical notation. Others think they are foreign imports, artifacts of neighboring cultures that left few tangible remains. A few fringe theorists claim they encode astronomical observations or esoteric teachings. None of these ideas have gained scholarly consensus, but the ambiguity adds a breath of mystery to the chambers where these tablets were found. A quirky detail from early excavations notes that several tablets were discovered, stacked in unusual ways, arranged between layers of earth, rather than atop one another, almost as if intentionally buried. This stratified pattern puzzled researchers. Was it simply collapse, or deliberate interment? While most believe in the former, the latter theory lingers among those who favor hidden knowledge narratives. We walk out into the open air, where the Yakapi rampart rises like a massive stone wave. From atop this structure, the entire city unfolds a labyrinth of ruin and memory. Far below lie the remains of the green stone, a polished, enigmatic monolith whose origins remain unknown. Some locals claim it once marked a sacred spot. Others suggest it was transported from afar for ritual purpose. It gleams faintly even today, as if holding onto a sliver of ancient significance. Beyond the rampart lies the Sphinx Gate, framed by carvings of watchful stone guardians. One sphinx, its face worn to softness, seems to gaze directly toward the city's buried archives, as though guarding the secrets beneath. And that, perhaps, is where Hattusa's labyrinth of language deepens. The Hittites maintained an extensive pantheon borrowed from Mesopotamia, Syria, and local traditions. They adopted gods freely, merging cultures into a syncretic tapestry. Yet in their most sacred rituals, they used words from languages no longer spoken in their own empire. Why preserve ritual speech no one understood? Why cling to phrases whose meanings had already faded? Some scholars compare this to Latin liturgy, or ancient Sanskrit hymns, ancestral languages preserved for sanctity rather than comprehension. But others suggest a deeper layer, that the Hittites knew these languages were old even in their own time, inherited from peoples who vanished or assimilated long before the Iron Age reshaped Anatolia. It is in those older layers in the shadows between Hittite and pre-Hittite culture that the most tantalizing mysteries lie. One undeciphered tablet, heavily damaged, contains repeating symbols arranged in grids. Some resemblance to proto-writing systems has been noted, but no firm link established. Another tablet describes a ceremony invoking the gods of the dark earth below, a phrase that appears nowhere else in Hittite literature. These anomalies, while few, weave a thin thread connecting Hattusa to deeper, more obscure traditions. We wander through the Lion Gate, feeling the cold breath of wind sweeping down from the Anatolian mountains. The carved lions' majestic, solemn watch, as though counting the centuries since their last worshippers passed beneath them. In that gaze, something unspoken lingers. The idea that Hattusa knew more than it recorded, and recorded more than it shared. And as the sun climbs higher, illuminating the pale stone walls, a faint sense stirs that the answers may still be buried beneath layers of earth, beneath rubble, beneath archives, beneath the very language forgotten by time. Our footsteps lead us away from the citadel, down the slope, past scattered stones that crunch softly beneath the shoes. The wind shifts, cool and dry, and now, far across an ocean and deep into the sands of Peru, another mystery waits one not carved into tablets but into bone. A mystery whose elongated shadows stretch across desert graves, whispering of origins both human and something not quite accounted for. The Paracas Peninsula beckons. Paracas skulls elongated shadows. In the quiet pre-dawn hours, when the Peruvian coast lies still beneath a blanket of cold desert air, the Paracas Peninsula feels suspended between worlds. The wind slips over dunes in long, unbroken sighs. The Pacific rolls in slow, rhythmic murmurs below ochre cliffs, and somewhere within that immense stillness, beneath layers of sand and centuries, an ancient whisper lingers light as dust, persistent as memory. It is here, in this remote corner of southern Peru, that one of archaeology's most unsettling mysteries resides, the elongated human skulls of Paracas. We begin our slow descent into the desert's silence. The light is barely rising, tinting the horizon with the faintest coral glow. Shadows stretch across the ground, long and thin mirroring, perhaps, the the forms waiting in the earth. The Paracas culture flourished around 800–200 BCE, long before the famous Nazca lines were carved into the plains just beyond the peninsula. They were master weavers, their textiles alive with brilliant colors that somehow survived in the arid climate. They were skilled artisans, traders, farmers, but they were also the custodians of a tradition that remains both fascinating and unsettling: the intentional elongation of skulls. As the sun crests the horizon, the desert deepens into amber. A soft glow spreads across the dry earth, illuminating the low mounds that once concealed necropolis's vast subterranean chambers filled with bundles of human remains wrapped in intricate textiles. Archaeologists have excavated many such sites: Cerro Colorado, Huaricayan, and others whose names echo through the archaeological record. And it was in these burial chambers that explorers found skulls with shapes unlike anything expected: elongated, tapering, stretched into elegant curves that seemed almost sculptural. Many showed deformities caused by deliberate cranial binding boards or textiles gently pressing the skull during infancy. This practice exists worldwide, from the Maya to the Huns. It changes the shape, not the capacity, of the skull. But some Paracas skulls appeared different, and thus the shadows lengthen in our imagination. Certain skulls displayed unusually large cranial volumes, 25 to 30% greater than average. Others had suture patterns that seemed atypical, sagittal lines partially fused or appearing less pronounced. Mainstream scholars emphasize that variations can result from natural differences, post-mortem damage, or misinterpretation of anatomy. And indeed, human variation is vast. But early researchers long before modern caution found the shapes startling enough to propose all manner of strange origins. Scholars still debate whether the most extreme skulls represent typical binding traditions pushed to an aesthetic extreme, or whether they belong to a unique elite lineage within Paracas society, individuals marked from birth for spiritual or social roles. Some suggest they may reflect genetic traits of a particular family group. Others believe ritual significance alone shaped the tradition. But standing here, amid the quiet desert, the skulls feel less like curiosities and more like voices from a world that interpreted the human form differently. Spiritually, symbolically, we imagine entering one of those ancient burial chambers. Torchlight flickers across adobe walls. Textiles remarkably preserved, thanks to the bone-dry climate, hang like banners woven with condors, serpents, and abstract cosmic forms. The bodies sit bundled in fetal positions, wrapped in layers of fabric finer than the finest modern embroidery. Bright reds, deep purples, patterns that seem to shift as the light moves. And there, within a woven cradle, lies an elongated skull. Smooth, symmetrical, shaped by human intention. To the Paracas people, such shaping wasn't grotesque. It was beautiful, noble, a mark of belonging to a sacred lineage. Some communities elongate skulls to mimic gods, others to distinguish elite families, others still as a rite of identity. The motivations vary across cultures. For Paracas, the meaning remains half lost, encoded in textiles rather than texts, in architecture rather than inscription. A quirky detail emerges from early 20th century fieldwork. Some archaeologists reported discovering cranial cradles, wooden frames, or molded pads found near burial bundles. Though many such reports are now lost or fragmentary, they suggest an intentional process, supervised and refined over generations. The desert sun brightens, and we move slowly across the peninsula, the ground crunching softly beneath our feet. Ancient cemeteries appear as shallow depressions, their outlines blurred by time. Some areas remain unexcavated, preserved by law and respect. Others were looted long ago, leaving scattered bones and broken textiles that the wind tries patiently to rebury. We pause at the edge of a cliff. Far below, the Pacific crashes against rock. The air smells of salt and dust, and in this moment, we imagine the Paracas people standing here themselves, heads crowned with cloth headdresses, elongated skulls wrapped in the finest textiles, their silhouettes outlined against a sun that glows with the same fire it did 2,000 years ago. Why did they reshape the human head? Theories abound. Some say it was aesthetic beauty defined by form. Others say it was spiritual, an attempt to mimic deities whose heads were depicted elongated in textile iconography. Yet others speak of social hierarchy skulls shaped to mark status or priesthood. The most speculative theories propose ancient migration routes or lost cultural influences. All remain possibilities. None hold the full answer. Yet the skulls remain echoes of a forgotten symbolism. Recent DNA analyses of some Paracas remains heavily debated, and often cited with caution, suggest complex genetic backgrounds, likely representing diverse interactions along coastal and highland trade routes. But the results were incomplete, contested, and not universally accepted. Modern scholars emphasize that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Evidence still not fully established. Still, the idea lingers that the Paracas people may have preserved a lineage separate from later coastal cultures. Their cranial forms, their textile motifs, their burial traditions, their sudden disappearance around 200 BCE, likely due to environmental shift or conflict with the emerging Nazca culture. All of these threads weave into a tapestry of mystery that feels almost too intricate to unravel. We drift now toward a small museum on the peninsula's flank. Behind glass, an elongated skull rests gentle, curved, elegant. Soft desert light filters through the window, touching its surface with gold. The skull feels strangely serene, its shape both alien and human. A quiet reminder that ancient cultures saw the world and themselves through entirely different lenses. A final peculiar detail. Early Paracas burials show signs of advanced trepanation skull surgeries performed with remarkable skill. Some individuals survived multiple procedures. Why such surgeries were performed remains uncertain. Ritual, healing, pressure relief, or symbolic transformation. The juxtaposition of cranial shaping and cranial surgery paints a portrait of a society deeply engaged with the human head as a sacred vessel. The desert wind picks up again, swirling sand around our feet. The skulls fade in imagination, returning to their dark chambers beneath the dunes. And in that hush, a soft realization settles. These weren't anomalies. They were identities. People lived with these shapes, loved with them, dreamed with them, were revered with them. And as the Paracas culture faded, their skulls carefully shaped across childhood, wrapped in ornate textiles, buried with care, became shadows stretching across millennia. Shadows that stir even now. The wind shifts, the colors of dawn deepen. And though our journey has carried us across continents, through buried cities, drowned landscapes, shattered temples, and forgotten scripts, the final breath of suspense gathers like desert dust beneath the rising sun. Because something remains. Not an answer, not a resolution, but an invitation to step gently into the closing chapter, where all 10 mysteries exhale together, and the night draws its curtain with quiet reverence. Conclusion. Night settles once more across the ancient world, drawing a soft curtain over the stones, the seas, the deserts, and the buried chambers we have wandered together. Each mystery, Teotihuacan's mercury-lit underworld, Suma's vanished constellations, Baalbek's impossible foundations, Doggerland's drowned silence, Pumapunku's jewel-cut blocks, Derinkuju's sunless corridors, Yonaguni's drowned terraces, Tiwanaku's cosmic gate, Hattusa's encrypted clay, and Paracas's elongated ghosts, now rests where we first found them, half in memory, half in shadow. Nothing resolves completely. And that is its own kind of comfort, for history, at its deepest, is not a ledger of certainties but a landscape of echoes. Civilizations rising and falling like breaths, their meanings drifting across time like lanterns on dark water. Some we can decipher. Others remain softened by distance, preserved only in the shapes they left behind. And yet, in each unanswered question, there is a gentle hum, an invitation to wonder, to imagine, to feel the quiet presence of those who walked before us. As the final hour deepens, the world grows still. The highlands cool, the sea calms, the desert exhales, and somewhere in that universal hush, we sense the lingering truth each mystery has been whispering all along. That humanity is older, broader, more intricate than any single story can hold. That the past is not lost, only patient. And that every unanswered riddle is simply waiting for footsteps soft enough to approach it. So we leave these ancient places, not with closure, but with calm. A calm that settles like moonlight on stone. A calm that turns questions into quiet companions. A calm that reminds us that the darkness of history isn't empty. It is full of gentle, flickering stars.